So, to conclude, I introduce to you your first assignment of the semester. The question of the infinitude of primes. Whether or not there are only finitely many prime numbers was one of the most important foundational questions in number theory. In this course, you'll hear long and complex proofs. Folks, and as budding mathematicians, now it is your duty to think about this question amongst yourselves, just like Euclid did. If there is a reasonable doubt in your minds as to the finiteness of primes, then you must declare that there may be just infinitely many. If, however, there is no reasonable doubt, then they must be declared finite. Whichever way you decide, the verdict must be unanimous. I urge you to deliberate honestly and rigorously. You are faced with an important problem. Please type the word finite or infinite in LaTeX and submit it to me by the end of the day. This assignment will be worth 10% of your grade.
You know something? It's hot. You'd think they'd at least air condition the place. I almost dropped dead in that lecture.
3 hours. He could have finished that lecture in 2. Talk. Have you ever heard so much talk about nothing?
Well, I guess he's, entitled.
Yeah. He's got the PhD, right? That's the system. Well, I suppose you can't say anything against it.
How do you like that business about diagonalization? Did you ever hear a phonier story?
You gotta expect that. You know what you're dealing with.
Okay, everyone get settled.
Right, this better be fast. I've got a theoretical physiology class tonight. I must be the only guy in the whole world who loves that class. Okay, Your Honor, start the show.
Now you people can handle this any way you want to. I'm not going to make any rules. If you want to discuss it first and then vote, that's one way. Or we can vote right now and see how we stand.
Let's vote now. Who knows, maybe we can all go home.
Yeah, let's see who's where.
Right. Let's vote now.
Anybody doesn't want to vote? Okay. All those voting finite, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. Infinitely many? 1. Right. Okay. 11 to 1 finite.
Somebody's in left field. You think there's infinitely many?
I don't know.
I've never seen a more finite set in my life. You sat right in the lecture and heard the same thing I did. The primes just get thinner and thinner until there's no more. You can just see it.
That's because you've only ever seen finitely many.
I've seen enough. 3, 5, 7, 11, and so on. Look, they're already getting further apart. I bet I could get to the end if I just go a little more. Do you want me to list them?
No. Well, do you believe this story?
I don't know whether I believe it or not. Maybe I don't.
So what did you vote infinite for?
There were 11 votes for finite. It's not so easy for me to raise my hand and send in a solution without talking about it first.
Who said it was easy for me?
No one.
What, just because I voted fast? I think they're finite. You couldn't change my mind if you talked for 100 years.
I don't want to change your mind. I just want to talk for a while. Look, we're waving our hands on and on. That's not a very good head start. I think maybe we owe it a few words, that's all.
Well, I don't mind telling you this, mister. We don't owe him a thing. We saw the whole lecture, didn't we? Look, we're all grown-ups here. Who was he anyway? A pure mathematician. You're not going to tell us we're supposed to believe him, knowing what he is. I've lived among him all my life. You can't believe a word they say. You know that.
I don't know that. What a horrible thing for a man to believe. Since when is dishonesty a group characteristic? You have no monopoly on the truth.
It's not Thursday. We don't need a seminar.
What this man says is very dangerous.
You know, I don't see any need for argument like this. I think we ought to be able to behave like mathematicians.
Right.
If we're going to discuss the problems, let's discuss the facts.
I think that's a good point. We have a job to do. Let's do it.
If you gentlemen don't mind, I'm gonna go close the door. I don't want profs to be able to hear us from their offices.
I may have an idea here. I'm just thinking out loud now, but it seems to me that it's up to us to convince this gentleman here that we're right and he's wrong. Maybe if we each took a minute or two, if we sort of try it on for size.
That sounds fair enough. Supposing we go once around the table.
Okay, let's start it off.
Right. I guess you're first.
I think they're just finite. Isn't it just obvious? I mean, nobody proved it otherwise.
Nobody had to prove it otherwise. The burden of proof is on us.
Okay, let's get to the facts. Number one, even a pure mathematician would trust the prime number theorem. What does it tell us? It tells us that they get far apart. Very, very far apart. It tells us that they keep thinning out and thinning out and thinning out. This process cannot go on forever. They get thinner and thinner and thinner, and then they end. It's as simple as that. I'm sure all of us can see it. Their density goes to zero, and so they must eventually end.
Euclid's entire story is flimsy. I heard he claims he can do it by contradiction. That's a little ridiculous, come on, don't you think? I mean, he couldn't even figure out the right axioms he's used for geometry.
That's right. Did you hear that? You're absolutely right.
Look, what about the number 1? If the absurdity of this doesn't prove it, then nothing does.
That's right. It's supposedly not prime, right?
Let's go in order.
Just a minute. Here's a number which shows the whole notion of prime to be ridiculous. The number 1. Right? 1 times 1 is 1. So its only divisors are 1 and 1. And yet, it's not prime? Look, I don't even think this whole notion of prime makes sense. I'm not even convinced there are any primes. The notion of prime is a pure mathematician's abstract construction that doesn't even make concrete sense.
Let's calm down now. Number 5, it's your turn.
I'm extremely confused and scared right now.
That's your privilege. Eat time. How about you?
I don't know. I start to be convinced, with this argument I just thought of. I mean, we can use Euclid's so-called contradiction arguments against him. Suppose there were infinitely many primes, then multiply them all together and add 1. Such a number couldn't possibly exist. Contradiction, right? So I think they're finite. Yeah, they must be finite.
Alright, how about you?
I don't know, most of it's been said already. We can talk all day about this thing, but I think we're wasting our time. Infinitude of primes? I'm yet to be convinced of the infinitude of numbers. I haven't seen infinitely many, and I bet my life none of you have either. I think they must be eventually come to an end altogether, and only corrupting abstract nonsense leads us astray from this.
You're right. It's the pure mathematicians, obsessed with abstraction. The way they are, they don't listen. I've got a prof like that. Once I asked him for a letter of recommendation, and he was reluctant to even write one. I bet he couldn't even write something that concrete. I haven't seen him in 3 years. Rotten prof. You work your heart out. All right, let's get on with it.
We're missing the point here. These profs, they're a product of a postmodern liberal education and a broken sense of logic. We can't help that. We're not here to go into the reasons why universities are a breeding ground for nonsense. They are, I know it. So do you, so do you. The mathematicians who come out of pure and abstract programs are potential menaces to society.
You said it there. I don't want any part of them, believe me.
I've been in the pure math program my whole undergrad.
Oh, now, wait a second.
I used to do a lot of proofs and even chase diagrams. Maybe it still smells on me.
Let's be reasonable. There's nothing personal.
There is something personal.
Come on now, he didn't mean you, feller. Let's not be so sensitive.
I can understand this sensitivity.
Okay. Let's stop bickering. We're wasting time. It's your turn.
Alright. I have a peculiar feeling about this. Too many arguments are not being rigorously worked through. Too many questions are being left unasked.
What about the ones that were asked? For instance, let's talk about that rational trigonometry stuff. I read a book about this. It's a theory based on the fact that the notion of infinity is ridiculous. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, what is this? Who do you think you are? Look, it's the same book.
Quiet! Let's be quiet.
Where did you get it?
I got it from Norman Wildberger himself. Look, it's even signed by him. And by golly, I've read the thing myself. He's an ultra-finitist, yes, but this book does nothing to rigorously prove the finitude of primes from the axioms we're supposed to be using. So don't bring this up as some sort of proof of your case.
Now listen to me. You pulled a real smart trick here, but you proved absolutely zero. Maybe the book is totally irrelevant to our problem. So what?
Now wait a second, what are you, Wildberger's lawyer? Listen, there are still 11 of us who think there are finitely many primes. You're alone. What do you think you're going to accomplish? If you want to be stubborn and hang us up, we'll miss the deadline and lose 10% of our grade. And that will be that.
He's right. I think we ought to get on with it.
Well, what do you say? You're the one holding up the show.
I've got a proposition to make. I want to call for a vote. I want 11 people to vote by secret ballot. I'll abstain. If there are still 11 votes for finite, I won't stand alone. We'll type it up, we'll get it in LaTeX, we'll submit it right now.
Okay, let's do it.
That sounds fair. Does everyone agree? Pass these along. Finite, 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 not finite, finite.
How do you like that?
Who was it? I think we have a right to know.
Excuse me, this was a secret ballot. We agreed to this, right? Like, if the person wants it to remain secret.
What do you mean? There are no secrets in here. I know who it was. What's the matter with you? You come in here and you vote finite, and then this slick preacher starts to tear your heart out with stories of a poor old prof who just couldn't help becoming a pure mathematician. So you change your vote. That's the most sickening...
Now hold it.
Please. I'd like to say something here. I mean,
I've always thought that a person should be entitled to have an unpopular opinion in the field of math. This is the reason I came here. I wanted to have the right to disagree. In my own field, I'm ashamed to say that.
What do we have to listen to now? The whole history of physics?
Yeah, let's stick to the subject. I want to know what made you change your vote.
There's nothing for him to tell you. He didn't change his vote. I did. Maybe you'd like to know why.
No, we wouldn't like to know why.
Look! Let them talk.
Thank you. This gentleman chose to stand alone against us. That's his right. It takes a great deal of courage to stand alone, even if you believe in something very strongly. He left the verdict up to us. He gambled for support, and I gave it to him. I want to hear more. The vote is 10-2.
That's fine. If the speech is over, let's go on.
Finite beyond a reasonable doubt. That's important to remember.
Look, we all know the prime number theorem says that for big enough n, the probability that a random integer not greater than n is prime is very close to 1 over log n. As n goes to infinity, 1 over log of n goes to 0. And so the prime numbers happen less often and often until they finally disappear.
Well, what have you got to say about that?
I don't know. It doesn't sound right to me. Lend me your chalk.
Please be careful. It's Hagoromo. For a good time, try Hagoromo time.
Take a look at this. Take a look at this. The powers of 2, right? 1, 2, 4, 8.
Okay, sure. What does this have to do with anything?
How many are there?
I don't freaking know. I don't have the slightest idea.
What do you think?
Infinitely many, I'd say. One for every natural number.
I'd say that was a guess. Anybody else?
Yeah, just take any natural number n, and then we take 2 to the n, and out pops another power of 2. Infinitely many.
Well, if we assume there are, in fact, infinitely many numbers at all, then okay.
There are, dude, come on.
Well, how many powers of 2 are there below some number n, right? About log base 2 of n, I reckon, right? And let me ask you this. The probability that a random integer not greater than n is power of 2 is what then? Around log base 2 of n over n.
Okay, log n over n. Will you get to the point?
Where does log n over n go as n goes to infinity?
To 0. Well, that's the most fantastic story I've ever heard. How can you make up a thing like that? What do you know about it?
I speak from experience. I learned that limit. I learned it in first year calculus. The man is right. The limit is 0.
Well, let me ask you this. You claim that there are finitely many primes because their density is approximated by 1 over log n, which goes to 0 as n goes to infinity. But the density of the powers of 2 also goes to 0, and we've just found them to be infinite. I mean, we've just proven the density argument to be faulty by rigorous examination of an obvious counterexample.
Rigorous? This is ignorant and sloppy. You can't even compute that limit.
You can do the limit really easily with L'Hopital's. It's 0.
I'd like to change my vote to infinite.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
The vote is 9-3 in favor of finite.
Well, that isn't the end.
The argument works, though.
Oh, brother. You sit in here and pull arguments out of thin air? Now we're supposed to believe that the notion of prime even makes sense? That there are infinitely many of something which possibly doesn't even exist at all?
Why wouldn't the notion make sense?
Like the nonsense about the number 1. It satisfies the definition of prime, but it's not prime. That's enough, isn't it?
What is the definition you're using? It's like divisible by 1 and itself. Don't you remember that? No, Mr. Foreman, I think we'd like to take a look at the definition of prime.
Alright, what's this for? How come you're the only one in the room who wants to see exhibits all the time?
I want to see this one too.
Look, if we're going to start wading through some sort of nonsense about redefining primes using categories and universal properties...
We're not. We're gonna find out why the usual definition of prime makes perfect sense after all. Number n is prime if it is greater than 1 and its only factors are 1 and itself.
That's the story.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, the number 1 is explicitly excluded from being prime by definition. And this is the definition we're supposed to be working with. Are there any issues with this?
You make it sound like a natural definition. It's not. Look, any number can be written as a product of numbers smaller than it. 13 is equal to the square root of 13 times the square root of 13, no? The definition looks like it makes sense, but there are no numbers which satisfy it. What are you doing?
I want to try something. You've given a very concrete example. You claim that 13 can be written as the product of the square root of 13 times the square root of 13. So I'm going to compute it. I'm going to compute the square root of 13 and see exactly what it is.
You're crazy. You can't compute a thing like that.
Perhaps if we could see it, this is an important point.
It's a ridiculous waste of time.
Let him do it.
Look, this is absolutely insane. What makes you think you can recreate a thing like that?
Well, do you mind if I try it? Actually, can you time me? I want to get really good at numerical computations like this because I'm practicing for the math GRE. So, yeah, can someone set a timer?
I got it.
Okay. When you want me to start, stomp your foot. That'll be the body falling. Start timing me from there.
Body? What body?
Sorry, I mean that's when I'll start computing the square root of 13 on the chalkboard.
Right.
Okay, I'm ready. Start now. Done. What's my time?
31 seconds.
God damn it, 31's prime. Anyway, that's not the point. Look, the square root of 13 is not a natural number. So 13 equals the square root of 13 times the square root of 13 isn't a factorization of 13 into smaller natural numbers at all.
Jesus Christ.
Bruh. What?
He's right.
Oh, that would be perfect.
I think he's right. You come in here with your heart bleeding all over the floor about rigor and proof, and you make up these wild stories. And you've got these soft-hearted kids listening to you. Well, I'm not. I'm getting real sick of it. What's the matter with you people? The primes are finite. There are finitely many. We're letting them slip through our fingers here.
Our fingers. Okay. Perhaps you'd like to start typing it up in LaTeX then.
You bet I'd like to tech it up.
I'm sorry for you.
Don't start with me.
What it must feel like to want to tech it up.
Shut up!
You're a small-minded finitist.
Shut up!
You don't want the primes declared finite because they are finite. You want the primes declared finite because you personally want it to be the case.
Shut up!
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Let me go. I'll kill him! I'll kill him!
You don't really mean you'll kill me, do you?
Hey, are you guys okay?
No, there's nothing wrong.
Okay.
Well, what are you all looking at?
Look, I don't see why we have to behave like children here.
Nor do I. We have a responsibility. This is the remarkable thing about mathematics. That we are to come down to this place and decide on the finiteness or lack thereof of a set we have not known before. We have nothing to gain or lose by the content of our solution besides how correct it is. This is one of the reasons we're strong. We should not make it a personal thing.
Well, there's still nowhere who's got an idea.
I think maybe we should try another vote. Mr. Foreman?
It's alright with me. Anybody doesn't want to vote?
Alright, let's do it.
I want an open ballot. Let's call our votes. I want to know who stands where.
That sounds fair. Anyone object? I vote finite. Number 2?
Not finite.
Number 3?
Finite.
Number 4?
Finite.
Number 5?
Not finite.
Number 6?
Not finite.
7?
Finite.
8?
Not finite.
9?
Not finite.
10?
Finite.
11?
Not finite.
12?
Finite.
6 against 6.
I'm ready to walk into his office right now and declare it an unsolved problem. There's no point in going on anymore. I'll credit no credit this course anyway, and it'll make no difference.
I go for that too. Let's take it in the prof and let this problem take its chances with 12 other guys.
Alright, wait. Who's got something constructive to say?
Well, something's been bothering me a little. This whole business about the contradiction proof. By multiplying all the infinitely many primes together and adding 1, the non-existence of the resulting number?
Don't tell me we're gonna start that. We've been over this. Such a number could not exist. Contradiction.
I know we did, but I don't go along with it. I don't follow. Surely such a number could not exist. But why is it a contradiction? Is that how these sorts of proofs are supposed to go?
Look, you're not gonna be satisfied until you see it again. I'll give a demonstration. Okay. Suppose there are infinitely many primes. P. Take the product over all primes of those primes. Now add 1. Now we're taking the product of infinitely many numbers, and we're adding 1. Such a number cannot exist. It's too big. And so it's a contradiction. The primes are finite. Ha!
Look at this. I mean, doesn't this seem like a strange way to prove something by contradiction?
What are you asking me for?
Wait a minute. What have I been thinking?
Have you ever seen a proof by contradiction?
Yes, I have.
In the movies?
Everywhere. In first year, on my problem sets. In the lecture halls. Too many of them. Proofs by contradiction came with the field I chose to study. Funny I didn't think of it before. I guess you try to forget those things. Anyone who's ever done a proof by contradiction would have carefully followed the axioms, along with the assumptions. You don't handle a proof like that. You need to be precise.
And he couldn't have made this kind of product, the product of infinitely many numbers?
No, he couldn't have. Such a product isn't well defined, whether or not you're assuming the infinitude of primes or not.
I don't believe it.
No, neither do I. You're just giving us a lot of bumbo jumbo.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I don't know.
Well, what about you?
Listen, I'll tell you something. I'm sick of this whole thing already. We're getting nowhere fast. Let's break it up and go home. I'm changing my vote to not finite.
You're what?
You've heard me. I had enough.
What do you mean you've had enough? That's not an answer.
I think you're right. This isn't an answer. What kind of man are you? You've sat here and voted finite with everyone else because of some class you wanted to go to, and now you change your vote for the same reason? I don't think you have the right to play with this, with such an important problem. This is an ugly and terrible thing to do.
Now wait a minute. You can't talk to me like that.
I can talk like that to you. If you wanted to vote infinite, do it because you believe the set isn't finite. If you believe it's finite, then vote that way. Or don't you have the guts to do what you think is right?
Now listen.
Are the primes finite or infinite?
I told you. Infinite.
Why?
I don't think they're finite.
Alright, I want another vote.
Okay, this calls for another vote. I guess the quickest way is a show of hands. Anyone object? All right. Those voting not finite, raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. All those voting finite? 1, 2, 3. 3. The vote is 9-3 in favor of the infinitude of primes.
I don't understand you people. How can you believe the set is infinite? Look, you know how pure mathematicians lie. I don't have to tell you. They don't know what the truth is. And let me tell you, they don't need any real big reason to convince someone either. You know, they start talking, bang, everything's abstract and intangible. Nobody's blaming them, that's how they are. You know what I mean? Senseless. Hard science and facts don't mean as much to them as it does to us. Hey, where are you going? Look, these people are thinking and lecturing all the time. And if some impossible sets or inexplicable theorems are invented, so they are invented. They don't care. Oh, sure, there are some good things about them too. Look, I'm the first to say that. I've known a few who are pretty decent, but that's the exception. Most of them, it's like they have no feelings. They can do anything. What's going on here? I'm speaking my piece, and you listen to me. They're no good. There's not one of them who's any good. We better watch out. Take it from me. Well, don't you know about them? Listen to me. Where are you going? I'm trying to tell you something.
If you don't shut your mouth right now, I am going to split your goddamn skull with a fat copy of Dumb It and Foot.
I'm just trying to tell you. Okay.
All right. Let's bring it back, everybody. I still believe the set is finite. I'll tell you why. To me, the most damning piece of evidence is given by the fact that only finitely many primes in the history of the whole universe have ever been written down. How could there possibly be infinitely many primes? How can we even conceive of such a thing? What is real is what is concrete. A number is a concept, And so the primes are precisely the primes that we can conceptualize. This is the only way to make sense of the notion at all. The definition is flat out useless. Frankly, I don't see how you can vote for the infinitude. What do you think of it?
Well, maybe. There's so much evidence to sift.
What do you mean, maybe? He's absolutely right. You can throw out all the other evidence.
That was my feeling.
What time is it?
10 minutes to 6.
It's late. You don't suppose they'd let us go home and finish it in the morning? I've got a table tennis court booked at the AC.
Not a chance.
Pardon me, can't you see the clock without your glasses?
Not clearly. Why?
Oh, I don't know. Look, this may be a dumb thought, but what do you do when you want to know the time but can't look at the clock?
What do you mean? I just asked someone, and I can keep a general feeling of the approximate time throughout the day.
So time exists even when you're not staring at the clock?
Of course it does.
What's all this for?
Well, I was thinking, we believe in the passage of time, even though we can't concretely visualize or even understand its nature. What if we treated the primes the same way?
Yeah, that's right, you're right. We can reason and understand these things logically, regardless of whether they're sitting in front of us. Say, you said you had a proof by contradiction.
Yes, I've just shown it to you.
Does anyone believe his proof beyond a reasonable doubt? You know what? You know what I think? I think you've got the right idea. Suppose there were finitely many primes, just as you claim. Then multiply them all together and add 1. And this number can exist. It's 1 plus a finite product of prime numbers. So it's a natural number too. Tell me, is it prime?
This is nonsense. They are finite. There's no contradiction.
Is it prime or not?
So what if it is? What if it's a prime?
By definition, it's greater than the product of all primes. So it's greater than each of the primes. So how could it be prime?
Oh, okay, and say it's not prime.
If it's not prime, then a prime must divide it, right? But for any such prime p, this is 1 more than a multiple of this p. So it can't be divisible by p unless p equals 1.
And we know 1 is not a prime.
Does anyone think there is still not a reasonable doubt?
I told you, I think they're finite.
Does anyone else?
I'm convinced.
You're alone.
I don't care whether I'm alone or not. I have a right.
You have a right.
Well, I told you all I think the set is finite. What else do you want?
I want your arguments.
I gave you my arguments.
We're not convinced. We're waiting to hear them again. We have time.
Listen, what's the matter with you? You're the guy. You made all the arguments. You can't turn now. A finite set's going to be declared infinite. The pure mathematicians will have had the last word. It's got to be finite. Stay with me.
I'm sorry, there's a reasonable doubt in my mind.
We're waiting.
It's going to be an unfinished assignment. That's it.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that except that hope in a few months, sometime down the line, you'll get some sleep.
You're all alone.
It takes a great deal of courage to stand alone.
I'm entitled to my opinion. You're not gonna intimidate me. Infinite. Infinite. Infinite.
Intimidate me. I'm entitled to my opinion.
What the? He actually broke my Hagoromo.